Hi, my name is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and I'm going to take you on a journey through time. In my essay, Discourse on the Origin and the Foundations of Inequality Among Men, Parts 1 and 2, I address man in his natural state, the development of vanity, the desire for goods, the creation of families, and include a history of discourse, religion, industrialization, and inequality. Part 1 of my essay addresses the divide in inequality. There are two kinds of inequality, one that stems from primal divisions in nature and one that stems from politics and discourse. In the beginning, mankind was wholly savage. Our failure as a species to accept things that deviate from the restricted standards we developed centuries ago demonstrates the ignorance of our predecessors and the influence on our current discourse. Then we get learned to gesture. Gesturing demands rather than attracts, so adaptation of the human voice into an instrument of communication was necessary for the advancement of our predecessors and humankind as a dominant species. Invention of language demonstrates a clear divide between natural and socio-political natures of humankind. We have no connections with one another, and because of that, no language. But the fact that we as people felt the need to communicate demonstrates our inherently collaborative nature, which is contradicted by the divisions in society and impoverished public discourse. As I say in my essay, accustomed from infancy to intemperate weather and the rigor of the seasons, inured by fatigue and forced naked and without weapons to defend their lives and their prey against other ferocious beasts or to escape them by running off, men develop in themselves a robust and almost unchangeable temperament. The key difference between humankind and any other animal is adherence to instinct. Humans often feel the need to deviate from natural instinct and rely on free agency to keep their sense of superiority fed, which often creates more problems in their lives. I go on to say, nature commands every animal and every beast obeys. Man experiences the same sensation, but he recognizes that he is free to resist. It is above all in consciousness of this freedom the spirituality of his soul reveals itself. Man can defy inequality based on nature because humans recognize their own agency in the passage of their lives, and because they don't rely on commands of nature to dominate their lives. Then, I say, nature, the state of nature is one in which care of our own preservation is the least prejudicial to the preservation of others. The state was therefore the most appropriate to peace and the most suitable for the human race. Man is not naturally evil because selfishness is not naturally evil. Selfishness comes from our innate desire to stay alive for the benefaction of our tribe as a whole. Natural default emotion of humans when we see people in pain is to empathize and imagine themselves in that position, which is key when addressing issues of inequality. Eventually, mankind was domesticated and we lost our natural inequality, replacing that with political inequality. They lose half of these advantages by becoming domesticated, and we should say that all our care is treating these animals well and feeding them and ends up merely degrading them. The same is true of man himself. Becoming sociable and enslaved, he becomes weak, fearful, servile, and his soft and effeminate way of life finishes up in enervating his strength and his courage, both at the same time. By advancing past the savagery of pre-civilized man, humankind has become weak in nature, and any semblance of strength and courage has been depleted. Man's passions stem from natural impulses, though their unnatural limitations of government are necessary to restrain them. And as we were domesticated, we turned to religion. I argue that religion orders us to believe that God himself took men out of the state of nature immediately after the creation, and that they are unequal because he wanted them to be. Religion does not prohibit us from forming conjecture, it draws us from the nature of man and of the beings surrounding him concerning what the human race could have been if it had been left to abandonment on its own. Religion offers a limited or shuttered lens into man's inequality, but it does not limit humankind from being successful on its own terms. After religion came industry. Industrialization moves natural physical competition from the lives of humans and replaces it with competition for advancement in society, which is the root of all political inequality. Inequality between the wealthy and impoverished leads both ends of the socioeconomic spectrum into states of disrepair. The key to ending suffering brought on by economic polarity is a simple, uniform, and solitary life. Sums up part one of my essay. The second part expands from the idea of natural inequality into political inequality. Part two of my essay, I argued that man's first sensation was that of his own existence. His first care was his own preservation. Hunger and other appetites made him try to return to various ways of life. action of uncivilized man were more pure and less motivated by negative stimuli, as opposed to post-civilized man that has surpassed physical needs into competition with other men. I continue to argue that nothing is as gentle as he in his primitive condition. He is restrained by natural compassion from doing harm to anyone himself, since nothing gives him an inclination to do so, even after he has harmed himself. Man before civilization was naturally peaceful because the competition that the human brain relies on to keep itself in check was focused towards survival, not competition with other people. Once man has been civilized, they were forced into a system of slavery. I say that it would be no more reasonable to believe that a person were at the start thrown into the arms of an absolute master, unconditionally and irrevocably, that the first way of providing communal securities proud and untamed men might have imagined was to hurl themselves into slavery. The system of submission and compliance that men were forced into once he was civilized became so constricted and dominating that any semblance of identity he had was stripped from him, much like in the institution of slavery. If we followed the progress of inequality in these different revolutions, we find that the establishment of law and the right of property was its first stage. Constitution and institution of magistracy was the second, and the third and last was the transformation of legitimate power into arbitrary power, that the condition of the rich and poor was authorized by the first stage. These three stages of inequality have been detrimental to global equality. The power he has as master of fate before his civilization is completely arbitrary and subverted by the society that he participates in. Finally, I say that moral inequality, authorized only by positive right, is contrary to natural belief. Whenever it is not combined in the same proportion with physical inequality, a distinction which demonstrates sufficiently what he should think in this regard of the type of inequality which prevails among all civilized peoples, since it manifests against the law of nature, no matter how that is defined. Moral inequality goes against the laws of nature. Man is no longer united for the species' survival, which would be our world's fall when man versus man is pushed too far. These two kinds of inequality stemming from primal divisions in nature, politics, and discourse are what causes all problems in the world. It can be traced back to this duality. There is no real solution to moral inequality. At some point, the conflict between man will become too difficult to comprehend. Those being oppressed by arcane systems of arbitrary authority, for example, people of different races, genders, sexual orientations, and cultures, will rise and fight the system until there is either total peace between humankind, or we all revert back to savagery in our predecessors. Thank you for listening. Join me again for Rousseau's Journeys Through Time.